Ashley. This is Dan Taddeo with Hageman, and I'm glad to have all of you on board today's webinar and how to customize your workspace. One thing, just a couple of key notes about this: it's not really meant to replace a full-fledged training or anything like that, but it is going to give you some good information on, and some pointers on customizing your workspace. So some of the things that I'm going to be showing you today will be working with some of the practices or best practices that I've kind of developed over the years and working with Autodesk or AutoCAD in terms of customizing a workspace. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So why do we customize our workspace, right? What's the value in customizing our workspace, right? A lot of times it could be just simply enforcing a common user interface amongst your employees or amongst your colleagues. Just having that uniformed interface helps maintain a little bit of, consistency across all of the application. So it's a familiar application or familiar user interface for support and things like that. Sometimes it's just simply to improve the user's experience, where a lot of time the improving part is really the individuals that have taken it upon themselves to improve their experience. For example, when we talk about improving like the visual aesthetics of it, improving how small some of the icons are, making them a little bit larger, in terms of ribbon bars. And, sometimes, individuals find it a little clunky to work with some of the ribbon drop-down menus, where the commands themselves are actually rolled up into a sub drop-down menu, and they're tiny. And what ends up happening is every time you click on the next command in line, that command now shows up in play. So, it's just an improving at a personal level, perhaps. Perhaps, regrouping and reorganizing, which is what I was talking about, of commands themselves, making that experience a little bit better and easier to find these things or find the application. One of the things I think about, when we're talking about, workspaces, is the fact that we oftentimes deal with multiple monitors. And a lot of times with multiple monitors, you may have the need to have floating bars or floating panels or palettes and things like that on another screen. And you don't want to have to do this every time you launch AutoCAD. So, kind of create that custom workspace that works best for you. One of the key points that, could be part of this is, I'll give you a background story. I worked with an individual who had a vision impairment. And with that vision impairment, he could see things, but it was just so tiny. And so at that time, he was using Toolbars, and those are the old AutoCAD classic, commands or toolbars on how you can get to the commands and things like that. And one of the things that they had was a little checkbox that said make that larger. And so now with the ribbons, they kind of made that experience a little bit easier for that person, because there's quite a bit of buttons there that are larger. However, right, there are some that are kind of rolled up in these menus. So, these might be some of the common things that, reasons why you might want to change your workspace and customize it. But, if you're like me, most of it is that, it's the second one there. I want to improve my experience. I want to be able to, get to these commands without having to hunt for them. One of the things I find, that bothers me a lot is, when I use the rectangle command versus the polygon command. Well, those two switch, they're under in a sub menu and things like that. And so we're going to talk about how we can customize our ribbons a little bit. So this is sort of the overview of what we're going to go through. We're going to talk about enabling palettes, tool palettes, property palettes, and things like that. We're going to even discuss about some of the hidden panels that Autodesk has, enabled disabled the visibility. And they do this not to just really hide them from you, but it's more, the reason is because, as you can see in this preview of the screen, this is the Home tab. You can see how it's populated, and it goes across the entire bar. So what they've kind of done is turned off certain ones that are not as use as common, for example, so that it doesn't squish everything else. Because once you get to a point where you have one more panel on that gray space on the right, as you may already know, something inside this line is going to get squished and minimized to a small little drop-down menu, and you know, it's kind of it kind of takes away the functionality of using the ribbons. We're going to talk about, you know, being able to, you know, make some of these things floating versus dot, and then we're going to talk about customizing ribbon bars. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and open up my AutoCAD and kind of show you some of these things that we can do. Now, I work down in my the basement of my home, so working from home, and it's kind of dark down here. And so, you know, having this gray, you know, interface, sometimes it just makes it a whiteout, you know, for me, and it's just too bright. And so, you know, some of the settings that we may, you know, change in our workspace is sort of like a global setting. Like we can change the overall appearance of this. And so in order to do that, what you could do is go into your application options. Typically, if you go into the application menu here, you go into the options, you can get to this. Now, you have to have a single file open because this typically is disabled until you have a file open, whether it's a new file or an existing file. You can get into this option dialog. You can also type in OP in this command line, and it will also bring up the option. And so in the displays tab, you'll see right here, there's a theme that allows us to change between light and dark. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. And what you're going to notice is that it's going to flicker a little bit. It's going to update. But this is a global setting that is being applied to my my interface, regardless of what workspace I might have at the top. So wait for it to go ahead and update that. And there we go. There are some other things that we can do while we're in here. If you had toolbars active, you'll notice, and I mentioned this earlier, where there is a little checkbox for larger buttons, and I'll show that in a little bit. One thing to note about toolbars, toolbars are, even though they can still be summoned or brought back up into your user interface, it's certainly not the way of the future, and it's not by choice of Autodesk, but mainly to maintain their, you know, the certification that, you know, their products are Windows certified. It's really Microsoft that's actually driving the force behind this whole ribbon bar. So the toolbars, they are there. You can still utilize them. Autodesk is not going to develop new command for them or develop new, you know, support or anything like that for them. So, you know, if you're going to customize your user interface using toolbars, just take it, you know, that, you know, and one day they may not be there. So it might be best to kind of embrace this whole ribbon, but that's the whole purpose of today, is to kind of hopefully help us be able to customize this so that it is a little bit better for us, and we have that, you know, an experience that makes, you know, AutoCAD a little bit more organized for what we're used to seeing. So other things that you can do, obviously, would be like kind of changing the crosshair size. You can see mine is set to about 15% of the screens, but I can actually bring this, increase this up if I wanted to. You maybe display of the file tabs or rollover tips. So when you hover over thing, you get these pop-up that you can see right on screen. So we can change some of these things. And again, this setting here is really a global setting to AutoCAD in general. Now, we also have things like tool palette settings. We have things like, you know, settings for how the program behaves that all gets configured in here, where it brings its plot files from, where it brings its template setting. All of those things could be part of that custom user interface experience or customizing AutoCAD. But the most important thing about all of this is being able to create a profile. Because your global settings here, even though part of it covers the topic of workspaces, it's also covering other configurations that you may have set. And this is probably the single most important thing that you can do, is making sure that you have a backup, right? Have a backup in place, have that, you know, there just in case you go and start changing that. In fact, I make a profile just before I even start touching anything, customizing it, and then create a second profile. As you can see, I have one called Dan Taddeo profile. I make that as my second one, and I customize that, leaving the original one, and all in the namesake of keeping what I have, just in case something happens with this one and it messes up something, or I do something and it's all me. That's because again, I'm customizing it. You do have to take kind of like measures to protect what you have, so that you can, if you have to, restore it, right? So there is an export and restore functionality that's here. And throughout this webinar, I'm going to talk about, being able to make the backups, and, when we talk about the different topics. So again, some of the things that you want to change, whether it's globally, and the display tab allows you to customize it. And in this case, I changed my theme. I could change my crosshair size. I could change the fade control. All of that is a global setting, and they can get saved into a profile. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. And what other things can we do when we start talking about customized user interface? Everything you see on screen is part of that user experience. That's part of the user interface. Whether I have my toolbar just floating down here at the bottom, whether I have it up here at the top, whether I have it actually docked into the bottom, as we are probably used to in the old days of AutoCAD, where we would have the command bar docked all the way. And then, of course, we can bring it back as a floating. What's really nice about floating bars, whether it's a command line or a tool palette, which I'll bring up over here on the right, these things here can actually be moved over, and I'm putting it onto a screen to my right. So if you can imagine me bringing it back and forth, I can do that. And that's what's nice about floating versus stop. So I can just simply drag any of these over to an edge, and it will basically dock itself to the side. Now, something else that I can do with this, and I'm going to bring up the properties palette, which is over here on the left side here, is that I can actually have these palettes do basically an auto hide. So when I need them, I just simply hover over that side and they kind of pop out. It's kind of like, when you have, when you're working in the garage, you have your drawers open with all of your tools, and you open certain drawers to get your tools and you close it back. So kind of like this, you bring it out when you need it and you bring it back. And then of course you can restore it to the base functionality of not having the auto hide by simply clicking on that button that looks like sort of an hourglass on the side, and it returns it to dock mode. Now, all of this is not, only saved in that profiles, but it's also can be saved in what's called the workspaces up here. Okay. So whether I want to have my palettes docked or in a floating mode, or the command line floating, even panels themselves can be brought into a panel separate from the ribbon bar. And what's nice about this, I'm going to change this panel here is part of the Views tab. If I change my tab, that panel doesn't just disappear. So imagine being able to put somebody's panel on a second screen, or leaving it on screen so that you can get to those buttons that you use quite often. Maybe it's the name views that we create all the time, and it's just nice to have that on screen all the time, so I don't have to go and switch over to a tab and look for it and up here, right? So part of that experience of customizing our workspace is that we can customize at sort of a basic level, which is just simply toggling on palettes or panels and dragging them into a floating space. So a lot of times when we are looking for that custom user experience, where we're just changing the way we work here, it might be along the lines of this basic just editing of that user interface. Again, just simply dragging these panels out, bringing them into view. And what's really cool is when I go up here at the top, whatever setting that I have here can actually be saved. I can actually save it as one of the ones that I have already in place by going to this drop down and hitting save. I'm going to go ahead and replace this. And what happens is when I change it to another view, I'm going to change it to another one that Autodesk has pre-programmed. The first of these three here are actually programmed by Autodesk, or actually, if you have plain AutoCAD, this is what you would see most likely. So if I go to the 3D basics, notice what happens to my interface. So notice that part of the the panel that I had that was floating out here is no longer here, but I have my palettes on the side here, over here. So these are toggles that are part of the view tab that I can turn off and on, but the panel itself is no longer available, so it doesn't show. Now, if I go back to my drafting and annotation, you'll see that there's my panel. It's back on screen. So when we come to talking about, creating a backup of like your workspace, so if you're getting ready to customize at this level, right? The first thing that you should do is make a save as of the current one, right? Now, once you do that, before you customize and move the windows around, move panels around, use this command to create your own, like I did up here. Now, again, the whole purpose of having that backup is so that we can have a spot to restore to, because I've had customer support cases where they've customized the drafting annotation and a complete tab disappeared or something is missing. And so having that peace of mind to be able to save as before you do any customization generates that backup that you'll need. And so in my case, I have one that's called the Dan Taddeo Workspace. Now, since we're talking about panels, one of the things that Autodesk has done in certain views or certain, I said views, but it's actually a tool here, and certain tabs is that they actually hide some of them or the panels themselves, because it's not a function that's used a lot. It might take additional ribbon space, and it could truncate or make other panels get, minimized. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and return this guy back to where it belongs. And what I'm going to show you is actually, it's a nice little thing. So on purpose, I'm on another tab here. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this button right here. It says return to the panel, and it will go straight back to the default where it goes. And you can see it's back here. The model viewport went back to the correct tab. Now, later on, we're going to talk about a CUI file. And, you might ask, well, how did it know to go back here? It's that CUI file, and I'll explain that later on. So what about hidden, tabs? What about those panels that kind of are missing, right? If we right click in this gray area here, you'll notice that it has show tabs, and you can see there are some that have checks and some don't. One of the ones that I teach in an advanced AutoCAD class is I talk about this guy right here, collaborate. The collaborate tab now is off, but when I go and right click, I go through the lesson. I say, hey, you want to make sure that you right click in the gray spot, go show tab, and make sure you have this enabled, because it does have a functionality that allows you to do draw and compare. Or, you can publish to an Autodesk Docs or do a shared. So sometimes these tabs or panels can be hidden based on, which tab that you're in. So you notice that it says show panels, share, Autodesk Doc, traces, and compare based on the tab that we're in. Now, if I go into the Vault one, right, and I right click and I go to panels, now it doesn't show me share or, Autodesk Docs or anything. It's now showing me the panels that are related to that tab. So if you ever run into a situation where your interface has, for whatever reason, and I'm guilty of this one. Sometimes I'll right click and I'll go and left click something, and then I realize, oh, I just did something, and it won't dawn on me right away what I just did. I'll be teaching a class, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, my collaborate tab is missing. All right, I need to go into the tabs and make sure that I enable that. So again, it's not to, hide things on purpose or make it a treasure hunt, but it really was to simplify the Autodesk or AutoCAD interface so that, things are not, minimized, or there's just too many tabs across here. If you have a lot of tabs, we had every single one of these activated, although we're talking about 3 more, 4 more, or something like that. You can imagine it can be an overwhelming experience to have all these tabs up here. And then you might find that half the time you don't even use one of the tabs or two. So simplifying some of this might also be part of that improving your experience with AutoCAD. Hey, I don't ever use that collaborate. I don't ever use, express tools or feature. I don't ever use those. So I'm going to go ahead and just disable those. It doesn't, delete them from the experience, but what it does do is simplify the tab offerings up here. And then it comes back to that whole story along the lines of setting up a standard, or at least having a unified user interface for everybody, right, where you can simplify things. And so part of that experience is saved within your custom workspaces. One of the things that I talked about is being able to create your own custom workspaces. What if I did that and say that this is you're going to notice that the interface is going to be slightly different from what I had before. For example, the palettes are gone, right? Maybe, and that's the thing about workspaces, is that those interface items that we have, palette panels, the location of the command line, you notice that the command line is actually wider, it goes across my screen, whether a panel is available or even if it's actually shown and checked here. Now, if you recall in the previous one, I actually disabled my collaborate tab and I switched over to Workspace. Lo and behold, it's here. It's actually enabled. So being able to take that level of control to change what is visible, what is available, could be, for that, unified user experience where everybody is using one, setup, could be in a role of this. Now, what's really cool about this dropdown is if we go into the workspace settings, we have the ability to disable them, disable their display. So I'm going to go ahead and just disable the 3D basic. Let me cancel that just to kind of show you where that would be. You can see it right here. So if I go in my workspace and I say, let's disable that, you'll see that it's no longer there. But with what I just did, it's not destructive in any way because it's still here. So this allows for me to have that level of control to basically, disable their display. Maybe I don't ever use that 3D modeling. I can do so. Now, one of the important things is down here, you'll notice right here, it says my workspace is equal to, and it's telling me what my current one is here. So one of the things you'll notice is down here is an option. When switching workspace, so in other words, when I go to the drop down up here and I pick another workspace, what do you want AutoCAD to do? So right now, out of the box, it's got do not save to workspace, right? So, even if I drag and drop and all that, it's not going to save it unless I specifically come up here and I say save workspace or save current workspace as, and then I tell it to save it as, one of the existing ones. But I can also have it to do it automatically. There's pros and cons with these two, right? Maybe you don't want it to save all the time, every single thing that you do. So and that's why that's actually set as default. And maybe you do. Maybe you want it to save all the time. So, but it's not, in the end of the world in terms of workspace when we have either of these turned on. It's just understanding when AutoCAD is going to actually perform the save or if it will, right? So what we have been talking about is mostly just like that basic level of customization. But what if we take this a step further? What if we take this a step further and notice that on my left side here, the word home is not here. It's actually over here. I did something to it and I want to show it to you. Notice that I have a draw, and typically the second panel is the modify panel where we edit the thing, but yet in this one, I have a customized home draw panel that I put into place. Essentially, it's the same thing as this, but notice what I did. I took some things that were in this drop-down menu here and added it as a row down here, just to make my experience better. One of the things that I could do, I mentioned how you have the rectangle tool here, and you see I have this rectangle tool twice in here. What if I wanted to, simplify this so that rectangle is actually a button like this? Or maybe I want the drop-down menu to be bigger, right? That's where we get into some of the sort of advanced features of customizing. And this is where we have to be extremely careful. Sure, I can customize my user interface and save it as a setting under a workspace, but always having a backup, right? Don't customize your out-of-the-box workspace. Because if you get into customizing your out-of-the-box workspace, in particular, having custom ribbons and things like that, the next time when AutoCAD updates come in, you could be looking at where it just blasts through those settings. That's not a good experience, especially when you have to restore things. And you don't want to rebuild this. You're going to spend, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it took me maybe 10, 15 minutes to get to this point. But that all adds up if you have several panels that you have to customize, right? I mentioned earlier how, the more panels, obviously it makes this larger. Look how far this is going. It's going all the way to the end over here. So obviously the end goal here would be to take this guy out of this home tab, or I could generate my own tab and have my own toolbars here. So let me go ahead and demonstrate how we can start off with, customizing our user interface right here. We can type in the letter CUI in our command line and press enter, which stands for Customize User Interface. We can also go into our Manage tab and hit the User Interface button here, which would bring up that same dialog as well. When you click on this, this is all going to be a sort of a wizard at this point. Any changes that you may do to the toolbars or ribbons that are done here doesn't necessarily show up here until we actually reset it in our workspace. And you notice here's my workspace. That is the current one. The first step and the first and foremost step is when you're going to be customize it, go ahead and make that backup. So on the left side, you can see what is already in this particular ACAD.cuix file. We can go and save it. We can make the changes here. I'm not saying you can't, but what I want to do is kind of get you along the lines of if you're going to customize it, you want to have a CUI file or CUIX file that is configured with your settings, but as a backup so that you can restore this quickly and easily. You don't have to have the same name. You can name it whatever you want. So in this case, I could name it Hagerman. So on the left column, these are the settings and workspaces that are in this CUI file, but on the right, there's nothing here. If I start expanding some of these, you're going to see that there's really no customization here. There are some contextual tab state, but the customization that are performed to each of these are brought in from that CUI file or by that workspace. So if I drag and drop this over here, you're going to see that workspace get brought over here. And now look at this. My tabs are now populated. My panels are now populated. And the ones that I've created would also be populated within here. But me just dragging this over here allows for me to start that process of creating another CUI file with my customization so that we can load from that. I mean, if you want, you can also bring in the defaults if you want. But if you really want to kind of dumb it down to simplify this, just have one, you could just do one if you like. Here is where we start off that process of creating a new customization file. Whether you click this button or this button, it actually brings up that Save As dialog, see? To Save As. That's how it initially starts this whole process. I'm gonna hit this button over here and you'll see it says the same thing, Save As. So whether, when you're first starting, creating a brand new CUI file, whether you choose that button or that button, it will save this as another CUI file. And you'll want to save it wherever you want. You'll notice that it has kind of like a pre-configured path of where it's going. You can save it wherever you would like, just for the art of having it backed up. But AutoCAD has it kind of pre-configured within its support directory. And you can see here are there's the CUI file. You'll notice that it has the word BAK. I'm sure some of you have seen this with your DWGs where it actually makes a BAK file, a backup file. We also know that that's one version, right? So it may not constitute as a 100% backup of what you had previously. So it's always good to have that backup. So you can give this name, again, saving it anywhere you want, that's fine. You can load it from anywhere if you want, but AutoCAD is just, it kind of defaulted to the support folder, so you could put it in there. Again, that can be customized. So I'm gonna go ahead and just call this one DTADIO, and I'll just put CUI file and just save it. So now I have a CUI file that sort of acts as a backup. Even though my currently loaded CUI file is the AutoCAD one, I just have a backup of my configuration just in case I need to recall that. Now, how about customizing our ribbon? How did I get to the point where I want to customize the home tab, right? Let me close out of this. I want to reset this so that we can see this tab right here. Now I'm going to type in the letter CUI in my command line, press enter, and I'm going to select my workspace, the one that I created here, the current one. And I can come in here and customize by allowing certain toolbars or palettes to be appeared, or more importantly, the ribbons. Now, the ribbon that we're working with within our the ribbon tabs is actually going to be the Homes tab. So you'll notice that they have something called 2D Home. So I'm going to expand that. And you'll notice that I have one below that says the DT Home tab. That was the second one that you see here. And so when we're looking at this, we can see that I can control here whether or not that particular tab is going to be visible or not. So maybe the one that I created here, I don't want that visible. So I can just simply come over here and just say no. Now, if I hit apply, it may not update that view right away, but in this case, you'll see that it is processing, and you'll see that the DT tab is there for a short period and then it disappears. And then it closes out of my CUI file or the editing of that. So I'm gonna go back into the CUI. Now I have run into a situation where when I type in, when I go to hit the apply button within this dialog, it doesn't necessarily close out of the dialog. It keeps it open. So depending on some of the changes that you do, you might find that that apply button keeps this open, but it doesn't change anything. When you hit OK, it will update and change. So now I've kind of disabled that second customize or the tab that I have, but let's talk about how do I customize the actual ribbon itself? How do I customize the ribbon? So the customized workspace here only is allowing us to customize whether we have it loaded, and we may have to unload and reload. But the real work where you go and change the appearance of these things, and I'm just noticing that it's not on the home tab. So let me just go ahead and put this back on the home tab. So forgive me for going back and forth, because the end goal is I want to take, let's say the Rev Cloud. I want to take this and make it large like this, right? So those customization, we can do this on this left side here. And so all we need to do is go into the ribbon area. We're going to go into, you can actually go into the tab area, and you'll find right here is the 2D Home tab. And you can see that I have the, I have a panel that I call DT Home Draw panel here, and then I have one that's that's above that. So what if I wanted to customize this even further? And so this is the one that you can see is being displayed right up here. If we compare it to the default, this here is actually a drop-down menu that's hidden, where this guy here is all in one row. So let's take, for example, the panel or this section here that we want to change. And so what we want to do is, actually, we need to go into panels here, locate that one that I called DT, which is down at the bottom. Here it is. And this is where we have to make those changes, where we're going to edit the actual buttons themselves. If I click on the button here, it actually expands it and tells me where it is in here. So if you ever are looking for the button that you want to work with, simply click on the actual button here on the side here, and it will bring you straight to there. Now, at first, when you look at this, it might be overwhelming, but what we see is a drop-down menu, and it's symbolized by this the star and this little arrow here. And you can see here's the Rev Cloud one. So I mentioned that the Rev Cloud here, I want to make this button larger. And so most all of the icons here actually have a small image and a large image. And I believe that the small image is like a 16 by 16 icon size, and a 32 by 32 is the large. And so if you were to go on Google, you can find all kinds of icon. In this particular case, the ribbon actually uses bitmaps or any of these kind of files here, PNG files, RLEs, DIB files. The most common ones are PNGs or bitmaps. Those are the most common ones. You can see I have one right here. So technically what I could do is create my own icon up here for a specific function if I wanted to, by simply loading that image. And it has to be the size of 16 by 16 or 32 by 32. Now, what I want to do is make this larger. And so by clicking on that first command here, you can see that it's rectangular. You know, again, this might be overwhelming looking at this, and you're kind of like, where do I change the size? I'll give you a little hint. So if you look at the line tool, it's large, right? So if we go and look at this, you can actually look at the settings here, and you'll notice that the button style is actually set large with text, and it got vertical. So in other words, it's vertical. If we go to the drop down, you'll see there's one that says large, but it's horizontal. That's actually referring to the location of the text. In a vertical fashion, the text shows up at the bottom like it does here. In a horizontal fashion, the text shows up next to it, which I don't want that. I want it to, you know, kind of look like this. So I'm gonna use this as the basis for my change. So I'll go back into my rectangular tool here, and I'm going to go to the button style, and you see it says small without text. I'm going to go up here and choose the large with text vertical. And so what happens is, even though it doesn't show the update right away here, it's going, the next time that I load this particular panel into my workspace, it's going to update it. But the kicker here is that we have to also make sure that each of the following has that same button icon, and I've already taken the liberty of fixing that already previously. So these must all be matching. Now, when I hit apply here, all I'm doing here is applying the settings I did, but take a look here. The cloud is still the same. That is because I still need to reload it into my current workspace. Even though I customize it within the CUI application here, what was loaded at the time is what is going to appear on here. So once I've done my work, it kind of sets up a way of check balance, right? So you can check to make sure, okay, I got everything, you know, configuration wise the way I want. Then let's go and apply it to it. Again, notice that I'm actually only doing this to my customized one. And I don't want to mess with the default one. I'm going to leave that alone. So I'm going to do it to my custom workspace. I'm going to go and hit customize over here, this button here. And I'm going to go into my ribbon bar. I'm going to go into my home. And you'll see here's the one that's loaded here. What I'll do on the left column here, I forget this all the time. It's actually there's a checkbox that's going to pop up over here. So this is what's loaded currently, and it doesn't give us a preview of it. But when I expand this on the left side, I'm going to scroll down, look for the one that I customize here. I'm simply going to do this. I can simply uncheck it and check it. And what it does, it reloads it. You'll notice that it puts it at the bottom down here, or I'm sorry, it'll put it into here. I can adjust where I want to place it inside here. In terms of the placement on screen, I'm gonna go ahead and this time I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. I'm gonna close out of this because I'm done with what I had to do for now. It's going to reload. And you'll notice that at first you're looking, you go, whoa, Dan, home disappeared. It's over here. And it's still loading. I'm actually looking for this to get large. So let me just verify that I've done that correctly. Go back into the CUI, make sure that customize. Oh, I forgot to do now that I'm thinking about it, I forgot to do the most important step out of this. And Rick France can probably laugh at me at this one. You see, when I made the change to this, hitting apply and hitting OK does not do anything good because I didn't save the changes I did. So let me do that really quick because I owe it that much to you. So let me go back into my panels. I'm gonna scroll down here until I find the one I call DT. Right down here. Go ahead and take a look at the this guy right here. Make sure that it's set. So there it is set. Okay, so it is set here. Let me make sure that this is also set. Button style here. Oh, that was one more step I had to do right there. Make sure that the top level of that drop down also has large for tech. Let me just save that. Go into the custom workspace. You know, one way that you can tell which one are you customizing is you look at the top, it tells you what you have highlighted right there. And so as long as it's here, the steps that we're going to do is we're just simply, and I don't have to expand any of this, I can just come down here and reload it. I'm going to save that just to make sure. Say done. Fingers crossed, and there we go. So now the button is actually large. So I see that we're nearing 45 minutes into this, and I wanted to open up the channel for a Q&A, and I hope that you found this actually helpful and how you can customize that ribbon or just in general the user interface at both the basic and the more advanced level as I just demonstrated with this. So with that, are there any questions that you may have for us?
There were a few questions that I've already answered, but you may want to go through them if you feel the need.
All right.
There was one I
Expand.
wasn't sure of. You said something, they said, hi, what do you mean by summoning? I wasn't sure what they were referring to there. I think it's just something you said, you called it summoning.
Yeah, I don't see the question. It's not showing me. So maybe you can read them to me.
Well, I just read you the one that said, what do you mean by summoning?
What did I mean by summon them?
Yeah.
So what I meant by that, I guess in the beginning of my, I might have mentioned about bringing up the toolbars. You can actually through command line actually bring up the toolbars or summon them back by just typing in -toolbar. And then it's a matter of knowing the names of them. So if I say draw, for example, I can actually show them. And now there's my old toolbar that's showing up on the left. So what I meant by summoning them is being able to just recall them, bring them back out. So, but again, that process is just, dash toolbar, knowing the name. One thing I don't recommend is if you look in the command line down here, if you do all, it's going to, and you say show, it's going to show you all of them. So you might find yourself with a whole new world of toolbars all over the place. You know what? Just for giggles, I'm just going to go ahead and show you them. So these are all the old toolbars here. So that's why it's best to know some of the names. And I believe you can do a Google and you can come across which toolbars that you want to watch. For example, layers is one, dimensions in another. Those are things that you could actually summon up by names if you know them by heart.
Go back to your CUI. I believe they're listed there.
They are. You're right. They are listed. So if I go into the CUI, that's a very good point. If we go into toolbar, because they have been enabled, you'll actually see them all here. These are all the names. So that might be a good way of, if you have everything displayed, then you could see their names here and go from there. So that's a very good.
A new question is, what is the enterprise customization file for?
What is the what? Sorry?
Enterprise customization file for?
Where do I see that? I do not.
I don't know. It's probably the space bar and beyond that, where no man has gone. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. That's the first time I've heard the enterprise.
Yeah, if you could give us a little more information about what you're asking, because I'm not familiar with the term enterprise customization file either.
Yes.
Now I'll add one thing. That's one of the things that I recommend people do for their customization. See where it says partial customization files in the CUI? I suggest putting your customization here and create your ribbons here, because that way it's separate from the out of the box stuff. So it's real easy to put your customization from one version to another. The exception for that, though, is workspaces cannot be in customization files. So you'd have to continue doing the workspace in the main file and doing the transfer the way he was showing you. But if you're going to create a completely brand new custom ribbon menu or custom anything, I would suggest doing it under a partial and load it in here just like you do any other CUI file, and it keeps your stuff separate. And again, once you go to the new version, you just load your CUI file.
That's a good, yeah, thank you, Rick. Yeah, that's a good point. It makes it a modular approach so that if you have to load one at a time, you can. But yes, that's a good point.
And as you can see, the Express tools, that's your Express tools. It's a partial customization file. So that kind of shows you how they are even using that out of the box. Is there any problems with a network location for the CUI?
Only problem that you might run into is if you're saving and editing it and it's got like security protocols that prevent you from writing to it, or if it's inaccessible to it. However, there might be times where if you have like firewalls or even antivirus that's doing lifetime real-time scanning, that you might run into some hiccups there with either performance or just getting general access to that. But in general, we've seen people do customize and put into a single folder, the directory of where all their CUI files are located. And that way everybody is kind of mapped to that.
What I'll do lots of times when I'm setting up other people's systems is I'll keep all their out-of-the-box stuff local, and that partial customization file, that's the one I put on the network because that's where the customization is that they want to maintain.
Absolutely.
So that also lowers your network traffic to where you're not having constant lagging issues and stuff like that because of 50 to 100 people reading their files off of the network at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
One more on the enterprise customization file, he said it's in the options for AutoCAD. So let's go to your options and see if we can see what, if you want to, change your workspace to get rid of all those toolbars, right?
Oh, okay.
Toggle your workspace, but then just go to options. Oh, you're gonna hide all.
So much easier.
So enterprise customization file. I wonder if it's under files. I'm just trying to find what he's talking about. Let's see where it says. Let's look under the customization files up top. See if that's where it is. Yeah, right there. I've never used that, and I've been using AutoCAD since 1988. So
yeah, me either.
I honestly have never even noticed it.
You know what?
I'll tell you what, I'll look it up real quick while if you want to continue looking at the questions and stuff.
Okay. Let's see if I can get them to appear. There we go. I just had to drag the question panel out. Let's see. So, perfect. Okay. Yeah, it looks like, are there any other questions? It looks like we just had that enterprise question. Are there any other questions with regards to,
okay, so the enterprise customization file is used for CAD managers to be able to control and modify customization data easier over a network. I was a CAD manager for over 20 years, and I just did it with the regular CUI file. So I've never tried it, to be honest with you, and I've never had anybody ask me this question before. But that's what it says it's for, is to be able to store interface customization that's going to be shared across many users.
Okay, is there a reason user-created content is placed at the end of the menus by default, given that custom content is likely to be a priority selection? You're talking about with the tabs I have, they show up at the end. And that's just an order of how you put them in on your menu. So if I wanted to, I could drag and drop them. It is flexible, that I can drag and drop these over to the beginning by just dragging them over, or it's just the way they were loaded. Any idea why attempting opening my CUI file locks up my AutoCAD and then on my laptop, the CUI is unlocked? That would be something we would definitely have to look into with you. We do have tech support that can definitely take a look at that. There could be, it could be a bad install, it could be a bad CUI file, it could be security. So that's kind of like a loaded baked potato question for now as to what the causes of that. So I would probably recommend, if you do have a support contract with us, to reach out to support, and we'd be glad to help you with that. Does AutoCAD and Bitdefender get along? Okay, now we're talking about virus and AutoCAD architectural. That again is something that Autodesk has brought up, time and time again. I think Bitdefender was one. I don't know, Rick. I think Bitdefender was one of the ones that was offending at one time, but I'm just not sure what the latest stance on that between that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about that in a while. Can you talk more about the profile import export? When would it benefit to use in other ways of pulling customization like import export from the start menu in Windows? It's
So
really, I'll
go
let you.
go ahead, Rick.
I'm just going to say profiles. First, to understand the difference, and this was one of the questions I answered earlier, the difference between a profile and a workspace. Profiles are for settings like support paths, display settings, graphic card settings, things like that. Workspaces are for what you see on your screen, where the ribbon is located, what panels are where tool palettes are they open, closed, what tool palettes are active. You have the properties palette open or closed. That's workspaces, the command prompt. Anything you see on your screen is a workspace. They used to be one and the same under profiles, but they had so many problems with display when they were one and the same that they separated them to make the display workspaces and profile being settings. So profiles are great if everybody's on the same version and things like that. One of the things I do not suggest people do on profiles is take a profile from 2022 and make it your profile in 2023. Export it from 22 and import, because you will lose any new features that are in 2023 if you overwrite that profile with an older one. I've seen people do this with very old versions of stuff. Why do I have question marks everywhere? Well, profiles aren't meant to go from version to version. They're meant for a CAD manager who's got 50 employees, and he doesn't want to have to go through and set up all the file support paths and everything else on all 50 employees. So he exports it and imports it to each machine, maybe through with that many people, I would do it during a deployment. But you could actually do it by exporting, setting it up on your machine, exporting it, having everybody import that profile. It does not, who the user, like if you look at some of the file support paths, they're to a certain person. It's going to keep it with the correct person when you do that, because under users, but it will allow you to be able to have all your network paths and stuff like that, where you don't have to keep setting it over and over again. So that's really what the import export is used for on the profiles. It also could be for different settings. Like I've had profiles before that were set up for different clients because we had different settings in our paths and stuff for different clients. So we would actually have a profile for different set clients that way.
Yeah. So yes. So profiles are only good for the same version as yes, that is the case. It's really meant to be able to, as Rick was saying, to simplify the process of transferring configuration from one PC to another or to 50 PCs, right? So once everybody has that profile, all of their support paths are configured, all of the display settings are configured, and things like that. So,
and like I said, I used to use it for different clients because we had different settings. Maybe we were having to emulate their software or their network settings for that particular client, or list routines that were only for that client, stuff like that. So we'd use the profiles to switch between the different clients. You kind of see this in AutoCAD architecture, which somebody mentioned earlier. There's a profile for Imperial, there's a profile for American metric, and a profile for European metric. And you can switch between the three, and it will give you different catalogs and everything depending on which set profile you're using in AutoCAD architecture and AutoCAD MEP.
Absolutely. Yep. Alrighty. So with that, I do not see any further questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So where do we go next from here, right? So, if you are absolutely, recordings will be sent out through email. I just saw the last question there. If you are interested in, taking a custom training class around the topic of customizing or need some support, we offer services in that. We also offer, some new user training. So if there are any new users out there that are simply looking for learning AutoCAD, we do have course out there. And I'm just going to show you our website just really quick so that you can, see how to navigate to it. So in our services area here, when we click here at the top left here, you can see there's a course catalog that will list all of the standard courses. And then of course down here are our training schedule. So, you know, in the future, if you are looking for some training that are course led, you can come in here and look at what's coming up in the near future and, you know, sign up for any of the classes that are here. You can even register directly on our website as well. So I appreciate all of your time today, and I'm going to pass this over to Ashley.
Well, thank you, Dan, for the presentation, and thanks, Rick, for helping out with questions. Thank you all for attending. Yes, you will receive an email tomorrow, which will contain a link for the recording. And also a reminder that a short survey will pop up as we close. But we will go ahead and close for the day. Have a great day, everyone.